This is Trial Transcripts Exposed by Crime in Court with Heather. Raw courtroom reads with my commentary. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Crime in Court with Heather. So first up, it's been a little bit since I've been on my channel. I apologize for the hiatus. I didn't mean to be gone as long as I did, or as long as I was gone. I wanted to take a little bit of a break. Well, first of all, I went on vacation, and then I wanted to kind of regroup and rethink how I was doing things on my channel. But then that turned into my life coaching business had to be rebranded. I needed a new website. It just became a whole big project that took months to fix. So I'm back, and apologies for the break, but I am committed to you guys. I started this trial. I'm going to continue to read through the entire trial transcripts of the Delphi homicides. So we left off with Stacy Bozanovsky, who was like a forensic scientist, I think she went by her title. And she was the one that matched a supposedly or definitely unspent round with supposedly being fired through the gun that they took into custody from Richard Allen's home. So they couldn't replicate it by cycling it through the gun, which they said it was a cycled bullet, cycled casing that had not been fired, but went through, so there should be little markings or whatever, and they should have been able to recreate it doing the same thing, but they couldn't. She had to fire the gun in order to create the same patterns, which makes absolutely no sense to me or to probably most people with a brain. So that's kind of where we're at. So we just left off with Stacy. We are moving on now to Patrick Cicero, who Major Patrick Cicero, excuse me, he's a major. Um, and we're going to read through his testimony here um, for the state. Sorry, this is the state's case part, whatever it is, I forgot already. 20, or not, 32, sorry, 32. All right, so let me shrink myself, and here you guys should hopefully be able to see that. All right, so direct examination of Major Patrick Cicero. Mr. Luttrell calls him to the stand, and he comes to the stand, he's sworn in and all that stuff. Mr. Luttrell for the state says, "Would you state your name for the jury, please?" "Yes, my name is Patrick Cicero," and he spells his last name. "Tell the jury where you're employed, sir." "I'm employed with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, where I currently hold the rank of major." "And how long have you worked for the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department?" "I worked with LaPorte County for over 24 years." "And what are your current duties, sir?" "Well, as the major, I'm mostly in charge of our civil division. I handle the civil employees and our captains, a lot of budgetary issues. I'm the third in charge of our agency." "And what positions have you held at the LaPorte County?" Then he cuts Mr. Luttrell off completely and says, "When I first started, I was a patrol officer. I was promoted very quickly, approximately a year later, to the rank of detective, where I remained for the majority of my career. I was in our detective bureau for over 20 years, with the last approximately 9 years being the chief of detectives. Prior to my tenure with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, I was also an officer with the Indiana University Police in Bloomington. I was also an officer with the Amtrak Railroads assigned to the Chicago Division." "And what training have you received as a—" I just want to say, if we're, hold on, the only thing that like really pops for me is let's say that there's some underground child CSAM going on, like child traveling, the other word for traveling, that when you go from one place to another, probably not by your own will. This might be happening in a case like this. I'm just saying there might be like a big, larger scheme going on in these towns, and law enforcement and people high up, judges, what and people in of those kinds of ranks are covering up for maybe some illegal activity that the police and law enforcement are up to. And if traveling children all over the place was to be a thing, wouldn't a railroad be an easy way to get kids from one place to another? I'm just saying, this guy has railroad, an officer with a railroad. So that means he was law enforcement for the railroads. And if children were being moved from place to place, I'm just saying, railroads might be a good way to do that. Anyway, sorry, that just popped into my head as I was reading. Let's continue. The next question from Mr. Luttrell. And what training have you received as an officer, both in your investigative jobs that you've held and any other jobs? Sure. As an officer, we all go through standardized training to be law enforcement officers in the state of Indiana. Most of my training is around the forensic disciplines, and I was a crime scene investigator starting approximately 2002 and remained as such to this day as a crime scene investigator. Forensics is Forensics are my specialty, and many facets of forensics and crime scene investigations more for the field type of investigations, training in bloodstain pattern analysis, crime scene reconstruction, just a litany of different types of trainings I've taken over 20 years. Yeah, and usually it's like someone within law enforcement is training someone else within law enforcement, so they're not really getting like necessarily the latest and greatest technologies or the latest and greatest um, education on these things that science advances pretty quickly, and if your law enforcement is doing the training, where are you getting your actual, science from? Anyways, and that include the next question is, and that include not just as crime scene investigator, but when you mentioned bloodstain pattern analysis and crime scene reconstruction, does that also include entomology? This is awesome to me, and this is a fascinating concept to me. I actually worked at a pest control company, and we had an on-site entomologist, and he studied things like the bugs and whatnot. So, and how that could determine, cause or time of death and things like that. So he says, yes, as a crime scene investigator in the state of Indiana, we received entomology training, but I have received specialized entomology training over the years to where it's mostly focused on the investigative approach and the collection procedures for crime scene investigators. Do you have any certifications in any of the subspecialties of detective or investigation work? So, I'm a certified crime scene investigator for the state of Indiana. I'm also on the certification board for the state, and so I certify crime scene investigators throughout the state as they go through their futures as crime scene investigators to ensure that we're maintaining standards. But also, again, law enforcement is training law enforcement, so you're missing that component of the advanced scientists' knowledge that, the knowledge of things within that study can advance quickly. And law enforcement isn't necessarily staying up to date with all of that. Anyways, By being certified, does that require you to attend a seminar or several seminars, or do you have to prove or demonstrate some level of expertise in order to be certified? Yes. So, with our certification program in the state of Indiana, it requires a certain amount of training, years of service as a crime scene investigator. There are proficiency tests, a written test as well, and you must show your work. The certification program lasts 3 years, and then you get a recertification. What training have you received in bloodstain pattern analysis? Over my career, I have attended numerous training venues, at least three 40-hour courses in just the basic blood stain pattern analysis. Why can I not say that word? I keep struggling. I have to say it like twice to say it. Sorry. So 40-hour courses in just the blood stain pattern analysis. Advanced courses in bloodstain pattern analysis, just one of the venues was just dealing with fabrics. And then I've attended several conferences over the years where they'd be break-off sessions talking about bloodstain analysis or certain areas of bloodstain pattern analysis. During reconstruction type crime scene reconstruction training, bloodstain pattern analysis is very synonymous in working together with a reconstructive model. And what professional organizations are you a part of? I'm with the International Association of Identification, and I'm also with the International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysts. Why are you part of those organizations? The organizations, they provide guidance, updates with training, as well as standards, and being a part of the professional organization keeps you fresh with the current trends. I still just because you're part of the organizations doesn't mean that you're implementing all of that new technology or new science, new knowledge into your protocol in your labs and with your techs and things. So just because he's part of these organizations, I doesn't necessarily mean that they are always on top of it. How many bloodstain pattern analysis cases have you been involved in where you worked and approached it from a incorporating your bloodstain pattern analysis expertise? Over the years, I've probably investigated several hundred investigations where blood was present at the scene and needed to be at least documented or analyzed. This analysis or these analyses are not just for death related investigations. We use them for assault, battery, we use them for even car crash investigations where we can, place the driver where he or she may have been. And is all that in LaPorte County where you've done that work? No, I have done work for Lake County, Porter County, St. Joe County, Jasper County, Stark County, Lawrence County near Bloomington, of course, Carroll County, and I was asked to work on a case in Las Cruces, New Mexico, years ago. Have you testified as a bloodstain pattern analysis witness expert? Yes, this is my 34th time testifying in the court of law. And have you given lectures on the areas of these subspecialties of crime scene investigation that you've mentioned? Yes. For bloodstain pattern analysis, I have been instructing at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, teaching the crime scene investigator course for the past, I believe, 9 or 10 years. I have taught at St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, which is now closed, both the basic and advanced courses there. Again, talking about bloodstain pattern analysis. I'm on a rotation now with the National Forensic Academy at the University of Tennessee. I've taught many lectures concerning crime scene investigations to not only our officers, but other agencies. For the last 18 years, I have been employed with the University of Tennessee as their instructor for forensic entomology for the crime scene investigator, and I still maintain that my tenure there. So it's something I've done for many years of different disciplines with this crime scene investigation umbrella, if you will. So blood stain and entomology, bugs. That's dealing with the bugs. and the progression of where they are in their life cycle to determine timing of death, typically. You also have to use like weather and things of those natures to things of that the timing of the larva, of the life cycle of the larva of the blowflies and everything that get produced when you have a dead body. So, next question. I'm going to hand you what we've marked as States Exhibit 285, Major Cicero. Can you identify that for me? Yes, this is my CV or curriculum vitae, which is just like a long resume. And does it, in further detail, describe your experience and your education and training in crime scene investigation and the subspecialties that you've mentioned? Yes, sir. I would move the admission of States Exhibit 285, Your Honor. No objection, says Ms. Auger. For the defense, and the court says, all right, without objection, it is admitted. May I pass the exhibit, says Mr. Luttrell, and the court says you may. He does so. It's been published, and the court says you may proceed. Next question is, I'm not sure if I asked you, I may have. How long have you been involved in bloodstain pattern analysis? It's over 20 years now. Would you please describe that field? Is it correct? I've called it a subspecialty of crime scene investigations. Is that accurate? It's just a part of crime scene investigations. Well, would you please describe that for the jury, please? Sure. Bloodstain pattern analysis is a field of study that relies upon a fact that blood is a fluid, and as such, it adheres to our physical laws. Therefore, blood under similar conditions reacts in a repeatable, predictable, and measurable manner. As analysts, we examine the size of the blood stains within the pattern, the shape of the blood stains within the pattern, the volume of blood within the pattern, its distribution within the pattern, and the location of the patterns within the crime scene. Ultimately, our goal is to provide the best explanation for the events that created the bloodstains. And how do you know that a particular bloodstain pattern is consistent with certain actions if you weren't there when it happened? As I stated, blood is a fluid. It reacts in a predictable, measurable, repeatable fashion. We know through studies, experimentation, visiting the scene, knowing what had happened, that the blood will react in a very similar manner depending upon the volume and the force applied to blood. It is repeatable, testable, measurable. The theory of bloodstain pattern analysis is the fact that it is a fluid. It will react in that manner. Well, what are some characteristics, would you summarize for the jury the characteristics of blood stains that can be examined as you make determinations? Well, the characteristics are the size of the blood stain that, depending upon the on the size, can tell us as to the type of force or energy that may have been applied to blood. If we compared it to water, for example, and I put water into the palm of my hand and I smacked my hand, we know what would happen as people who've lived on this planet for a while, that it'll go in many different directions. I'll it'll actually turn into water drops as opposed to a body of water. We looked at the shapes of the stain, whether they're round or elliptical, because we have a principle of a stain shape in vector principle, whereas the stain's shape could tell us as to the direction to which it came from. We look at the amount of stains, the volume of blood. We look at the location of the patterns within the crime scene, whether they're low or they're high. It's going to give us an indication as to perhaps where the victim or the assailant was located. Overall, all these characteristics provides us with a way to provide the best explanation as to what occurred. As a result of that, we have what's referred to as taxonomy of the characteristics for bloodstains. okay? And it provides us with how do we explain what they are? We give them names as to whether the blood stains are impact stains or if they're just transfer stains or if it's just a pooling or saturation. So we have a lot of terminology that we have developed over the years to describe what we're seeing at the scenes. And you have studied the various physical properties of blood, is that correct? Yes. And the characteristics of blood stains that give you information about how the blood got there? Yes. We're talking about the properties of blood of being cohesive, where blood wants to stick together. Blood is also adhesive. So if I have an object or even my hand, blood is has adhesive qualities or wants to stick on my hand. But when forces are applied to blood, that's when it's propelled or flung off. Blood, of course, like any kind of fluid, has a certain viscosity as well. What is crime scene reconstruction? Crime scene reconstruction is a discipline that incorporates all different disciplines and their results. So, as a reconstructionist, I will utilize blood, the results of blood stain pattern analysis. I will utilize results of a shooting reconstruction. I will utilize the results of what a pathologist determined, whatever the labs may have determined to be evidence, and this is all data. And this data is put into a formula, if you will, of how we look at the data and try to determine the best explanation as to what occurred. We use the topics and premises of superposition, yeah, superposition, I don't know, lateral continuity. These are all terms that we use as to what happened first. The chronology. We use Locard's exchange principle. All these principles apply to crime scene reconstruction, and ultimately we put it into what's called an event sequence to determine what is the best explanation as to what occurred with the data given. You've been taught this crime scene reconstruction as well as the blood stain pattern analysis? That's correct. Have you actually performed that in the field, like you have with blood stain pattern analysis? I have, several times. And have you taught crime scene reconstruction like you were taught and like you practiced in real life cases out in the field? Yes, I have. And who have you taught? I've taught the attendees at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. Yes, mostly Indiana. We've had some Illinois students as well. And have you, as you said, you testified in bloodstain pattern analysis. Have you testified in crime scene reconstruction? Yes, certain portions of the reconstruction were always indicated in our analysis of the scene. And what you mentioned, the National Academy at the University of Tennessee, the National, did I get that right? The National Forensic Academy? Yes, the National Forensic Academy with the Tennessee Law Enforcement Innovation Center. And you've taught there? What various topics and disciplines have you taught there? Well, as of recently, bloodstain pattern analysis, but for the last 18 years, I've taught primarily forensic entomology for the crime scene investigator. I have taught topics as far as what's called scatter investigations, to where when body parts are scattered, how to document and collect these. And I work with forensic anthropologists on other areas of interest, such as time since death and working with exhumation techniques. Were you asked to assist in this particular case and provide insight and analysis on bloodstain pattern analysis, saying that word, um, as well as crime scene reconstruction? Yes. And when did you begin your involvement in this matter? It was February 12th of 2024 is when I first had communications with the prosecutor's office here. So this is after Richard Allen I believe, is already arrested. Would you tell the jury what you did to prepare yourself? What materials did you review? I reviewed numerous files of photographs on a flash drive. I reviewed reports, specifically autopsy reports, the diagrams, laboratory reports. I'm sure there's additional data that I reviewed. Well, why did he only come into this case in 2024 when that's 7 years into the investigation? Did that include the DNA reports prepared and signed off by Stacy Bazanovsky? Yes, it did. And the photographs, did that include among them photographs obtained by the crime scene investigator Sergeant Page, Datzman, and Olahi? Yes. And not just the photographs that the jury may have seen, but all the photographs that they did, at least that were provided to you. You examined those. That is correct. What about the autopsy photographs? Did you examine those? Yes, I did. And you mentioned reports, the autopsy report. Yes, sir. And what about personally examining things? Did you go to the scene, this location where the crime occurred? Yes, on April 4th, 2024, I visited the scene, and on April 5th, I examined the clothing worn by Abby Williams. And the clothing worn by her, specifically, what items did you personally examine? I examined a pair of jeans, a dark colored hoodie sweatshirt, a pink shirt, sleeveless shirt, a gray sports brassiere, and a black regular brassiere, and a pair of shoes, canvas shoes. I'm sorry if you mentioned it. Did that also include a black hoodie sweatshirt? Yeah, it was a dark color, black or dark blue. It was dark colored. With the name German on it? That is correct, sir. I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as Court's Exhibits 286, 87, and 288. Do you recognize these photographs? Yes, sir. And were they three of the many photographs that you reviewed of the crime scene? Yes, sir. Mr. Luttrell says, I believe we've agreed these were three that were not admitted previously, Your Honor. That's why they're being shown now, and I would move the admission of 286, 87, and 88. Ms. Auger says, in 286 with the ruler? Mr. Luttrell says, yes. Ms. Auger says, and 288, Abby Williams. Mr. Luttrell says 287 is the lower part of the tree and 288 is a cropped photograph of Abby Williams. Ms. Auger says no objection. The court says, all right, without objection, they're all included or admitted. Sorry, like a fuzz stuck to my face. Apologies. So they admit all those exhibits. Ms. Auger says, whoa, that's not admitted. Oh, yeah, it is. I'm sorry. Has that been admitted? Mr. Luttrell says it has. Ms. Auger says, what exhibit is it? And Mr. Luttrell says, may we approach? The court says, yeah. So now we've got a quick sidebar conference. Mr. Luttrell says, those are fair questions. My problem is, I know every one of the photos now have been offered into evidence. I cannot assert to the court that I know the exhibit numbers of any of these. The court says, no, but I remember seeing that one, 18, 19, and 20. Mr. Luttrell says, I apologize. If you want me to make the record with the exhibit numbers, I'll have to take a recess and examine them, but I'm prepared to go ahead if you are. I'm certain that they were all in evidence. Okay, how can you be so certain? I believe that Ms. Auger says, I believe that they've been admitted, but just for the record, I think it's important to have an exhibit number. The court says they have an exhibit number, 286, 287, 288. So are you telling me we need to take a break? Mr. Luttrell says, let me see if I can do it this way, Your Honor. The court says, okay. Sidebar conference concluded. Next question. We're looking, for the record, at State's Exhibit 20. Is this a diagram that you recognize? Yes, it is, sir. And in fact, are you familiar with the photographs on which it's patterned or copied upon in its preparation? Yes, sir. And would it assist you in describing and talking about the facts of this case? Yes. It provides some accurate depiction of the spatial relationship between blood evidence and where the decedents were located. Thank you. Just 1 minute, Your Honor. You've testified that you went to this location that this diagram depicted and walked that scene yourself. Yes, I did, sir. And you did so after you examined the photographs of the scene. Yes. And would you tell the jury how that assisted you? Again, when I referred to the term spatial relationship, specifically to the left of the diagram, you see a darker gray, somewhat of a circle, and it's labeled tree. It assisted me, the distance between the small tree and the large tree, and where the decedents were located in the scene, approximately, of course. Being the tree itself also assisted in that I suspected there was a lean to the tree. There is a natural lean to the small tree that is as well. So it just assisted spatial relationships in the topography itself. The area to which the decedents were located, it's almost a somewhat of a bowl or a depression, if you will, where as you get closer to the small tree, it actually raises up an elevation. The next photograph is this one that you reviewed? Yes, it is, sir. And Ms. Auger says, is there an exhibit number? Mr. Luttrell says, I'm sorry, I know it's an exhibit. I have it here, but I do not know the number. I can provide it for you later. And was this one of the photographs that you examined? Yes, one of many. Would you be comfortable, sir, in coming down and I may be able to ask you questions with referring to the screen on this and subsequent photos. Does that photograph show the bowl area that the girls were found? It does. Depth perception is a little difficult based upon the two-dimensional photograph. But oh, I'm sorry. Did I do that? You may have, but it's fine. I don't know. That's like a touch screen or something. Okay, as we get further towards Abby Williams and Libby German, the topography loses elevation. It's almost like a bowl, if you will. This is the small tree I was referring to in the diagram. LG is next to the larger tree. And and the tree in the foreground, the smaller tree that you referenced, have you heard a phrase, the blood-stained tree? Yes, sir. Or the F tree. And where approximately, it's not a close up, but are you familiar with where on that tree and point the jury where blood was documented via photographs as you can see it? Sure. So when I'm approximately 4 feet from the base of the tree is a blood stain that is located in this location. That's fine. That'll work. The on the and I believe there'll be additional photographs just on on the right around the corner of this stain, approximately 4 feet again, are additional blood stains, as well as right below the stain on this. And the right side of the tree are additional stains. If we can bring it back at this location, approximately, I believe it was 2 to 3 feet from the tree, and this is going towards, I believe, the northeast of the tree. There is a blood stain on the ground as well. And when you said approximately 4 feet, the upper portion of the blood stain, the middle of what we're looking at of the tree, that's because you've seen measurements from the ground to that location. Yes, there's other photographs with a scale within the photographs. And it's just right around just under 4 feet, approximately. This next photograph, Ms. Auger says, before we go, Your Honor, can the record reflect that Major Cicero was referring to Exhibit 38? The witness says, thank you. Mr. Luttrell says, I believe that's correct. I would agree with that. The court says, but it states Exhibit 286, 87, and 88, correct? Mr. Luttrell says, 286, 287, and 288, Your Honor. The court says those are the photos. Mr. Luttrell says, are the photos that were not in evidence and that have been a part of this presentation. Court says, okay. What do we have here? This is just a closer exposure of the tree with a blood stain that is at this location, again, approximately 4 feet from the base of the tree, and you see the decedents in the background. Mr. Luttrell says, for the record, this is Exhibit 38. Ms. Auger corrects him and says 37. And it's published. I'm now showing you what's been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 286. Was that a close-up of that tree with a measuring device? Yes, it's a close-up of the blood-stained tree, that tree with the scale to provide reference as to how large it is. Utilizing the scale, it measures approximately 1.37 inches across this horizontal line here, and I believe it's 5.9 inches from the top of the stain to the bottom of the specific stain. So it looks large on the screen, but it's not a very large stain. As well, in this area of the pattern, there were additional stains that measure approximately less than 1 to 3 millimeters in size. And with blood stain pattern analysis, we measure in metric. These stains were round and consistent with what's referred to as spatter. And he spells it. It's not splatter with an L, it's spatter. And that is a mechanism to which, when force is applied to blood, some type of force, blood becomes individual drops and made contact with that tree. What? He thinks it just got there by force? This stain, the large stain that I'm describing, is consistent with what's referred to as a transfer stain. Okay, so some of the drops, the drops were some were drops and some were contact or transfer stains. Got it. Okay. So the larger stain was consistent with what he says is a transfer stain, and a transfer stain is nothing more than a bloody object coming in contact with the tree. Likewise, there are stains on peripheral of this stain right here that are also several contact stains, contact transfer, if you will. This particular stain on the right of this stain in the center is also consistent with a transfer stain. So you have previously used a designation to describe the shape of an upside down L. Is that correct? That is correct. I described this as an upside down L because I don't want to tell you that it looks like more like a weird F, which is a rune in certain Odinist circles. And around that upside down L are various, as you described, spatter. As the jury's looking at it, to the left, and then a larger than the spatter, a portion right there adjacent to the vertical part of the upside down L, right there. Yes, sir. And then you're saying around the corner, around the tree, there's photographs of other blood on that tree? Yes, sir. What are we looking at here? This is State's Exhibit 287. Yes, sir. I believe this is the blood stain that's approximately 2 feet from the base, more on the north side of the tree, and it's consistent with transfer stains. And the area located here in the photograph and here, you see it looks a little bit darker. That is consistent with blood accumulating. There's more volume, and as it dries, it becomes dark brown, almost black. Did I put the photograph in upside down, sir? I don't believe so. But then again, I'm not real sure, sir. But then again, maybe you did because the leaves are up here. It looks like I had it flipped. My apologies. If you would take State's Exhibit 287 and I'd ask you to walk towards the jury and show that in its proper configuration, right side up. Ms. Auger says, which exhibit is that? 287, ma'am, says the witness. Ms. Auger says, thank you. Mr. Luttrell says, thank you. That wasn't a test, Major Cicero. It was my error. This photograph, and we'll be getting the exhibit number for it very shortly, is what's going on in the photograph. The crime scene investigators applied a chemical that's called crystal violet, and what occurs with the chemical is that it will stain blood to help with contrasting colors. What we see with the color of the bark, it sometimes mars blood stains or it confuses us. So utilizing the chemical it really brings out the contrast. Is this a chemical that you've used in your labs, in your crime scene, sorry, in your crime scene work and your blood stain pattern analysis? Yes, sir, several times. And what did you find significant about this photograph? The enhancement to, view it better provided me with the enhancement to view it better provided me with some better insight as to the specific areas of this larger stain that's in the middle. The hypothesis was developed that because this area, the horizontal part of the upside down L, was very squared and it was something that we don't normally commonly see with just a transfer. Likewise, this stain that's over to the right of the large stain in the middle of the photograph also presented some interesting detail where the margins they're uniform, they're smooth and uniform, and even so, the hypothesis was developed that this was more consistent now with a transfer pattern. And what a pattern transfer is we have an object that would leave repetitive patterns that appear the same. And does this violet color appear to be on the other portions of this bark, not just the spot adjacent to the vertical portion, but over here to the right? Is that, or left? Is that correct? It appears that way. Yes, sir. And would that be where you have seen blood on the previous photographs? I did not see that my naked eyes I did not see that with my naked eyes without the enhancement. It's just the color of the bark could somehow, be very faint stains on bark as well. It brought it out. So all these years later, not surprisingly, he um, doesn't actually visually see that the markings that were there left by the blood. But using this chemical, apparently you can still see it. So the chemical is reacting. Is it reacting to blood? That's what it's intended to do, yes. And that's what's happening here. To the best of my knowledge, I'd like to ask what else could it identify or find? What else would light it up besides just blood? But he doesn't ask that. Maybe they'll ask the defense will ask that. I'm not sure. So to the best of my knowledge as to how they applied it, I believe so, he says. Oh, and that's what's happening here? Yes, to the best of my knowledge, I believe so. And we have here, where is this particular application of the chemical on the tree? I believe this is also the north side of the tree that the previous exhibit we saw was approximately 2 feet above from the base of the tree itself. And as we can see, it looks more voluminous, but that's just the stain itself. Very faint stains will come up because of the chemical. For the record, this is State's Exhibit 53, previously thought as 52. Did this help you in your analysis of determining the best explanation for how the blood was applied to the tree? Yes, it's all consistent with the transfer, so some bloody object would come in contact with the tree. And it's this photograph with the law enforcement's evidence markers, 1 and 2, in the left-hand foreground. You're familiar with this photograph? Yes, I am. How does this help? How did this help you understand the location? The CSIs who investigated this, from what I understand, utilized evidence marker number 1 as the location where there was a blood stain approximately 2 feet to I believe, north or northeast of the tree. This blood stain in itself, located here, is an accumulation of blood, and it's not just drips that were falling. It was a larger than just drips, consistent with, more likely, a small pooling, but because of the surface of the leaves on the ground, we didn't really see a pool per se, but there was an accumulation there. What I believe is to be more stains were identified at placard number 2. It was not as voluminous to create a pool, but there were stains at the CSIs that the CSIs discovered there. So the next photograph shows 3 and 4 evidence markers by the police. 3 and 4 in the right hand side. We're looking at this photograph, and how did you consider this photograph when you were doing your exam? For context, here is the small tree with the upside down L. So between the tree and where the decedents are lying, 4, when I originally viewed these photographs, I thought was possibly either another blood stain that was observed, whether it be multiple drips or a small accumulation. And I thought it was my understanding that 3 was possibly a larger pooling of blood. 4 may represent that pool of blood. 3 may be something of a different nature, but they're identifying something that they observed there. I was not quite sure when I observed it. Okay, great. So why are you forming an opinion on things when you weren't even there personally? Like, shouldn't the people who were there have something to do with it? Have something to do with, uh, what's the word? Verifying these on the stand? Um, I just totally forgot, and I should have said it in the beginning. Judge Gull is no longer in this case. As well, as of like this past week or so, she just announced that she is not going to be coming back for re-election on the bench. So that's a good thing. Although I believe her daughter, who may or may not be just as corrupt, is also running for the bench. So that might be something if people are local to, you know, try to get word of mouth about. Anyways, all right, where were we? You know that there is the largest pool collection of blood at the scene in that is it's in this photograph. Is that correct? It is. This dark location here in the photograph is what's referred to as a pool of blood, and it was in the process of coagulation. What coagulation is when we have a pool of blood with its clotting factors will react into a gelatinous mass. We'll see separation of serum as a result of that contraction of blood, which it would be consistent with that separation of plasma that would more likely soak into the ground. So I guess blood starts to coagulate and separate. He's saying the plasma would have been in the ground and the serum would have been at the top. So this photograph showing the body of Libby German in the photograph, Abby Williams in the background. These next few photographs I think will describe. I'd like you to look at and then tell the jury what you're learning from them. Was there anything about this specific photo that you wanted to point out? With this specific photo, I wanted to point out that the blood stains that were under Libby German's right leg, specifically, you see in this photograph the calf, the ankle, and the bottom of the foot, or the side of the foot in this. States Exhibit 40 looking at previously admitted and this photograph looking towards the girls with the blood in the foreground. Is that correct? Yes. This is the large pooling of blood and coagulative blood in this location. There's also blood that extends outward towards Libby, Libby that was not part of the coagulant or the pooling. You may try to stay to the side there. I'm sorry. As much as possible so all the jurors can see. So here is the pooling and the coagulant, and he indicates it on the exhibit. And here these leaves and branches are stained. States Exhibit 39. So the coagulant or the gelatinous mass of blood is here. And as we go farther towards Libby, you can see that these leaves are stained. This stick is stained and it continues on. This is Libby's right leg. Here's the bottom of her foot. It's not in focus, but there's a blood stain on the bottom of her foot. And here's the gelatinous mass and the blood stains. The blood stains on the leaves leading up to her final location. This is more close-up shot, exposure of the bottom of the foot where we see bloodstains on the bottom of the foot. This is consistent with transfer. And when you say transfer, again, what do you mean? So a bloody object came in contact with the bottom of her foot. And when you say an object, what could that be? It would be consistent with Libby German moving and basically walking on blood. So she stepped in it, is what he's saying, I guess. But we don't know that for sure. I guess it would make the most sense. This photograph, looking down on Libby's body, what did you observe in this photograph from a blood-stained pattern perspective? On the lower torso and the torso are numerous bloodstains consistent with flow patterns. A flow pattern is a volume of blood, and due to gravity, the blood will flow downwards based upon the force of gravity. The stains that are marred or referred to as altered stains, meaning that it goes through the flow patterns and creates what appears to be transfer stains. So this is a complex pattern in the fact that they're overlapping each other and flows had occurred. And you can see that at some point, the best explanation for the appearance of the flow is that Libby German was upright. You can see with the flows that they've changed direction going downwards, and you can also see subsequent alterations or transfers through the flow patterns around her neck and her upper chest. You may want to try to stand over on, yes, this other side, please, and see if that around the neck and upper chest area there are numerous blood stains consistent with alterations and transfer, and if something was coming in contact with that area, as if something was coming in contact with that area. On Libby's face were numerous flow patterns extending to her face, moving downward to, it appears to be going downward to her right side of her face. You can see a flow pattern that goes up over her cheek and down towards the bottom of her face. A flow pattern that's observed on the going from the right eye downward to the ear, and on the hand we observed the voluminous amount of blood on the hands to indicate or to include the cuticles where it coagulated and dried like a scab. And that would be both hands, correct? That would be both hands. Just in this photo is the left hand. When you mentioned the some kind of flow to the right of her eye, did you examine that and examine that from the photographs? I did. This is the left hand. This is Libby's left hand. Again, it's the cuticles. There's a significant amount of blood that's just coagulated and almost became like a scab-like, just a voluminous amount of blood on the hands, transfer stains or altered stains on the wrist and forearm as well. So he's trying to paint the picture that the transfer stain came from Libby herself. It came off of her bloody hands, when in reality it looks exactly like the F rune in Odinist religion. This photograph, again, the branches have been removed and you see the collection of blood. Well, we'll move on to, was there anything specific about the photograph that you wanted that helped you analyze it? It's just a closer shot of the blood stain and the flow patterns on the face, as well as the flow pattern exhibited signs of dilution, meaning that there was some type of moisture mixed in with the blood. Her tears. Remember, she cried, like the tears coming down her face. And in your experience, what would that have been? Absent a raindrop or water, it could be consistent with a tear. So they're saying that the blood on her face was diluted with the liquid from her tears. Is the pool shown from a different vantage point in this photograph? Yes, the pooling is located here, the coagulation pooling. We have the right hand. Yes, this is the right hand, similar to the left hand, a voluminous amount of dried blood on the hands within the cuticles. You can see a flow pattern. I'm not quite sure as to the direction of the flow. Several different transfer stains and alterations. This is the left hand from another angle. Is that correct? Yes, the left hand from another angle. You can see that the hand, a voluminous amount of blood. You can see that some blood had been basically transferred off, or maybe she had touched something to remove that blood. Maybe. Or maybe somebody took her blood and transferred it with their finger or a stick or an object. I don't know. I'm just saying. I think that it's quite possible, especially since it doesn't look like a natural. It doesn't look like a hand. An F does not look like a hand, but okay. Now we're looking at the photograph showing the right thigh of LG. Yes, this is Libby's right thigh. This consists of bloodstains, voluminous strips of bloodstains with subsequent flows. This is the top of the right thigh. This pattern is consistent with what's referred to as a projected pattern. A projected pattern is a volume of blood which is ejected out of a branch from one of the larger vessels, such as an artery or a vein. Positioning is of such with the flow patterns going downward, gravity will take over. That's the energy that's applied, that the leg would have had to have been somewhat underneath the injury itself for the blood to project out of the wound, which we know is the neck, and land upon the leg like that. If Libby had been standing when that blood hit her thigh, would you see a different pattern? What we would see are the flow patterns flowing downward towards the knee and the lower leg as opposed to the side of the leg. I almost wonder, and this is such a horrific thought, but we remember how um the upside down hanging man is one of the Odinist symbols. Like it is Odin from their religion, that he had to like hang himself upside down a tree. I don't remember what the whole reason was, but anyways, it almost, because she didn't have blood flowing downwards, I I wonder if perhaps they hung her and then took her down, because we know that she was dragged to the spot where she was placed. We don't believe that that is where she actually uh where the act took place, because there's drag marks underneath her, and uh, it's just, we know that she was not likely, um the deed was not done right there. So I often wonder if she was perhaps hung upside down. I don't know. It's a horrific thought, and I'm sorry for even making you guys have to think it, but it could be an explanation as to why there was no blood flowing downwards down her body. So what we would see, the flow patterns flowing downward towards the knee and the lower leg as opposed to the side of the leg. So given the injuries to her neck and given this pattern here, do you have an opinion for the jury as to her positioning when that blood pattern landed on her thigh? The best explanation for the appearance of this particular projected pattern is that Libby would probably have been seated at one point for the wound to have to be somewhat over the leg and to come straight down, and then for the flow patterns to have occurred while the blood was still wet. Okay. Or she could have been moved, which we believe her body was. Now, we've seen from a more straight on view that pattern on the thigh. What do you see here, sir, that you can tell the jury? This just reinforces the fact that this is a projected pattern. We see the individual drops that were voluminous. We also see what's referred to as these little arms called scallops that is showing energy, and the type of energy that's applied with this type of projected pattern is what's called hydrostatic pressure, meaning it's the cardiovascular system pumping out blood and the blood hitting voluminously, hitting the leg, creating that pattern. And of course, the subsequent flows are also an indication of the volume of blood. So he's saying basically it came from her. It the blood was still pumping, according to this expert. I believe we have a close up here of Libby's face. Did you examine that closely before coming to your conclusions? Yes, sir. You had testified about altered blood pattern. Would you tell the jury what you mean by altered blood pattern? Any blood pattern that originates and it has a subsequent alteration, usually where in the realm of the transfer stains, where we call it a swipe, where blood is on an object and you can see movement or a transfer stain, that's referred to as a wipe, where blood is existing where blood is existing one like the leg, huh? For example, and something just wipes through it. We see many of these on the body itself. So they're getting wiped or swiped over. And did you find what you believe to be on the body of Libby altered blood patterns? Yes, consistent with the legs, with the projected pattern, where specifically going into the interior portion of the legs, there's alterations, as well as the torso area, where something wiped or swiped through the blood and it's altered, it's in an altered state as a result. This close-up view, does this show us the area of a closer view of the area on the eye? Yes. So extending from the eye down to the ear, as we can see, it gets lighter and lighter and still maintaining on the peripheral of the stain a darker appearance. This is a textbook consistent with dilution, sorry. With all the blood, so that's the tear, so you can see, I guess, a tear in blood as it like goes down her face towards her ear, so she would have had to have been laying down in order for that to happen. With all the blood under her nose and extending down from that across her right cheek, does it give the appearance that she is bleeding from her nose? It gives the appearance, but we know from the post-mortem or the autopsy that she did not have injuries. She did not have injuries to her nose. What would have happened is the blood being fluid and it takes the path of least resistance, gravity would have occurred where her head would have had to have been lower than where the blood source was located. So it's indicative of movement. So some sort of movement. So she might have been laying down, she might have been upside down, she might have been being moved at the time, who knows? Do you believe Libby was moved after she died or after she was unconscious? Yes. And would that movement have resulted in this distribution or this pattern of blood? Yes, it could have. Yes. So this is the photograph of before she is moved on her body. Is This is the photograph of before she is moved or her body is being moved, but before she is removed from the location. Tell the jury what you found significant about the photograph showing the back and the leaves adhering to her back. Along the leg, there's blood staining. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. There's blood staining on the leg as well as, and this is the right leg, as we observed on previous photographs. I've noted that the blood on the side underneath on the interface between the ground and the leg and alongside the backside. And what, again, my apologies, what we see is also because of the adhesive nature of the blood, the leaves are sticking to the blood. This is the photograph showing after LG had been moved that night, after Libby had been moved that night. An examination, did you find anything significant about this photograph? Yes, it was just a little bit of blood on these leaves located here where Libby was discovered. This would indicate that she is no longer bleeding because if she was she was still alive and bleeding, would expect to see pooling. So they're saying she was moved there. Otherwise, there would have been a pool of blood underneath her. So where was she the rest of the time? Now, we're going to look at some photographs of Abby Williams. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And what did you find significant about this photograph? There was, according to the DNA expert or the DNA reports and crime scene photographs, this is the only area of blood for Abby. You can see that there is what appears to be a small pooling to the right of her arm and shoulder. The injury to Abby is on the left side of the neck, and I believe we'll see later, or we'll see better photographs of the area underneath the body and in this dark hoodie sweatshirt, that it's very much saturated. Also of interest is her final positioning. I described it as a somewhat pug, pugilistic, pugilistic pose, meaning almost like boxing, but her arms are up and bent at the elbows and close to her body. So she had her arms up, something like this, like she had her arms close to her, but her hands were like bent down. And did you examine? I don't know if you guys. Let me. I can go with a bigger camera. It was something like this. I don't know how the arms were exactly, but or the hands, but she had her arms up and bent towards her face. Did you examine the multitude? Oh, sorry, let me shrink myself again. Did you examine the multitude of photographs of that sweatshirt while it was on her body, and then you also viewed the sweatshirt up close, personally observing it, correct? Yes, that occurred on April 5th, 2024. Now, the sleeves have been pulled down. What did you notice about this photograph? Mr. Luttrell says, and this is, for the record, this is State's Exhibit 288. And Major Cicero answers, what I noticed about this photograph, contrary to what we've observed with Libby, there were no blood stains observed on Abby's hands. She was very clean. Likewise, I observed many different photographs of Abby at the crime scene in different views, different angles, different lighting, and I could not observe any blood stains that were on the sleeves or the arms of Abby Williams. Now, you examined several autopsy photographs as well, did you not? I did. And in fact, did you see anything different on her hands at the autopsy? The autopsy photos, her hands did have blood on them, her arms and hands. She was wearing the sweatshirt at the time when, in the autopsy, when she had photographs with the blood on her hands. I have no data that anything was taken off of Abby Williams. But in those photographs, she was not wearing the sweatshirt, was she? I understand your question. Yes, she was not wearing the sweatshirt at the time in the autopsy. And you visited the scene yourself? Yes, I did. And you know that they had to be carried out with the assistance of some kind of cart. Is that your understanding? That's what I was informed, yes. And you know what that hill's like between them and the area of the cemetery up above, correct? It's very steep. And in your experience, how many death scenes have you been to? Hundreds, sir. Would it be unusual for the blood to, what would be the normal course of the blood when she has been placed into a bag and moved up a hill and transported to a van to go to the morgue? Sure. Well, blood, it should be noted that in my analysis in my report, I noted that the blood was still wet and dried and coagulated. Movement of the body within a body bag could somehow affect all the saturation if bloodstains were still wet on the actual shirt or the sweatshirt itself. So during transport, manipulation of the body, picking the body up, more bloodstains could transfer as a result of those actions. In fact, in these photographs, see no blood. The crime scene photographs of Abby Williams' hands? That is correct. Neither the hands nor sleeves, and there's many other photographs of her hands and sleeves as well. Given your personal observation of this sweatshirt and your examination of the photographs at the crime scene, would removal of that sweatshirt have changed or altered the blood pattern on her body in any way? More than likely, yes. This photograph is another. Now, the hands are still within the sweatshirt. What did you find important about this photograph? As you stated, the hands are in the sweatshirt. The sticks were removed at this point when these photographs were taken and noted the flow pattern that are going up the chin, defying gravity. This is also consistent with her positioning is blood stains on her. Maybe she was the one that was hung upside down. I'm telling you, I just have this gut feeling somebody was hung upside down. And this is saying she had blood flow pattern going up her chin, defying gravity. How does that happen? Unless she was upside down. This is also consistent with her positioning as bloodstains on her under the chin and over her chin are not consistent with her final resting place. So she was also moved, is what it looks like. Was blood coming from her mouth? Is that where the blood would come from? According to the autopsy report, there were no injuries to the mouth. This is more consistent with the blood coming from the actual wound itself and going over the chin and into the mouth. I'm telling you, he was upside down. A close-up of that view of the injury to the neck? Yes, this is where the injury's at. So the injury's to the neck and the blood's flowing up. Yeah, that's not normal. In my understanding, the jugular vein was breached, which would create a lot of blood loss, and this is a coagulation of wet and dry blood on the face. Is this her right hand? Yes, it is her right hand. Again, no blood noted on the hand. We have another view of the right hand. Yes, the right hand with no blood on the inside of the hand or sides of the hand or fingers. Did you consider this with the torso exposed and her? Did you consider this to be significant? Yes, it's significant due to the absence of blood on the gray brassiere below the breast line. There's no blood stains observed on the shirt nor the torso area. This would be consistent with Abby was wearing uh, this at the time that she passed away. Now, so he's saying she was wearing that at the time? I don't know. But otherwise, you would have had to have smeared the blood to get it on her. So yeah, she would have had to. She would have had to have been wearing that. And remember, she's not wearing her own clothes. The pink shirt is hers, but the pants are Libby's, I believe. She's wearing her own shoes. She's wearing Libby's sweatshirt. Now the left hand, or actually it's Kelsey, Libby's sister's sweatshirt. Again, the left hand, no blood noted on the hand whatsoever. And this view of looking down on her and seeing the blood on the chin. So what did you note here? Just a close-up shot of how the blood flowed up and over around the chin, indication that she was moved at some point when the blood was still liquid in that location. You can also see saturation stains here on the dark sweatshirt, which again, you can't see any type of redness or saturation on the sleeves. So this is a dark sweatshirt, but you said blood is very visible on that. Yes, you can still see the blood. But when you examined blood on the sleeves and the cuffs, you didn't see the discoloration? Not in the crime scene photos, no, sir. When you say something about being moved or she was moved or moved, what movement do you see as illustrated by these photographs of Abby Williams? In order for these bloodstains to have occurred and the appearance of the flow patterns, it appears as though Abby's head would have had to have gone back or the blood source would have had to have been above in order to create these flow patterns and go over the chin. So if the blood source was coming from above, that would mean she's upside down, like I suspected. I don't know. I really do think one of them might have been, if not both. I think that this was a sacrifice and it's sick and twisted, and I don't know what these individuals got out of it, but they seem to have gotten something out of it and pinned it on an innocent man. I want to go back to this, back to the photograph, and ask you, Major Cicero, did you consider how you believe the best explanation for the blood on the tree, which is the left part of this diagram? Based upon the blood evidence and the context of this scene, the blood letting occurred somewhere in this general area because blood, especially to the injuries that were to Libby, and all this blood that's on the outside of these different locations, this is not a scale diagram. It all belongs to Libby, from what I remember of the report. So, where's Abby's blood? Where is Abby's blood? Did they take it? Like, what? If Libby's blood is all the stains everywhere on the ground, what happened to Abby's blood? Did they drain her upside down and collect the blood somehow? This is really like I have this. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying this is what I think happened. So for the blood near the body of, or under the body, or near the body of Abby Williams, are you saying all the blood, according to your review of the reports, was whose blood? Libby's. So the bloodletting event would have occurred somewhere here, the beginning of it. And this is the result of both carotid arteries being breached as well as the jugular vein. Blood would be almost instantaneous and would be very voluminous. It is a normal reaction from my experience in observing others who were victims that the victim or the decedent would put their hands in the area of the blood loss, hence staining your hands. And we observed the hands on Libby's hands. We observed the hands on Libby's hands, okay? The blood, I believe he means. So, what you saw on Libby's hands is what you're accustomed to seeing at homicide scenes, death scenes. With that type of breach of such an artery, or both arteries, and the jugular vein, yes, we would see a lot of blood on their hands. Can you tell the jury, Major Cicero, where you believe the best explanation for where you believe Libby would have been when she was injured or wounded, and where she moved from that point to where she was found? She would have been injured here initially in this vicinity. Movement would have been to this location where again she continued to bleed, and here this very large pooling that you saw, the coagulation is where Libby most likely succumbed to her injuries. And which part of your body of her body do you think was most likely, where do you think it was positioned in relation to the pool? It's likely that her positioning of the neck would be in the general vicinity, her head and neck in this general vicinity for the blood pooling to have occurred. These subsequent blood stains that you see between the pooling and her body was a result of Libby most likely being dragged to that location and transferring the blood. In considering the photographs and your visit to the scene, can you tell the jury What would have been if, let me back up. From the perspective of the creek, would Libby's body have been exposed, more exposed, if it were at the large pool or behind the tree? Objection, Your Honor. Be most visible? Objection to the reference behind the tree. The court says, rephrase your question. Ms. Ajay says, thank you. Next question. Her movement there adjacent to the tree, was she in that position where she was found? Would her body be more visible or less visible to someone from a perspective at the creek? At her current position, she'd be less visible because this tree is actually almost like two trees. It's a very wide base, and the trees kind of separated off. I'm going to ask you, Major Cicero, the same question about Abby, about her movement, where you believe she was when she was injured, when her neck was cut, and where she was moved to until she was succumbed to those injuries. Based upon the lack of blood evidence anywhere else but this location. So this is the only location you have blood evidence, and it's only it's only Libby's. It's the best explanation is that she succumbed at this location here where she's observed. What? That's not what? Where's her blood, sir? How did she die in that location or succumb to her injuries in that location if there's no blood? I'm so confused. What kind of an answer was that? Let's move on. And where do you believe she was? Given the evidence that you reviewed or the blood on her hands and her injuries, and where the blood was not, where do you believe she was when her throat was cut? Based upon the blood evidence, the context of the scene, she was at this location. In what position, sir? She was most likely in the supine position. As she was found? As she was found. So you're saying she was injured on the ground in the position she was found, even though there's no blood, not enough blood to indicate that she was injured there. Got it. Have you observed crime scenes with victims suffering neck injuries, either this type or even less serious? And you've also said that she moved because the pattern on her face. But now you're saying that the injuries took place where she's at. You just contradicted yourself. Have you observed crime scenes with victims suffering neck injuries, either this type or even less serious? Yes, yes. What is unusual to you? Is there anything unusual to you about the lack of blood on the hands of Abby Williams? It's very unusual not to have any blood on the hands. In this case, also the sleeves, which were over the hands at the time. There's no information or evidence to show that she died immediately. This would have taken some time. And again, there's no blood on her hands. So, and you said that usually with an injury like that, they grab at their wound. So, how she got clean hands, what you're saying, sir, doesn't make sense. How many times have you seen in cases where there's been serious neck injuries where there's no blood on the victim's hands? I've never seen it. He's never seen it. So this is completely oddball, rarity, unique circumstance in history. The one time in history where someone's neck was stabbed and they didn't reach for it. Again, I think she was probably tied up, hung up on the tree. I don't know. Just a thought. Or something. It just doesn't add up. Or maybe it wasn't even there because her blood's not there. Anyways, moving on. He says, I've never seen it. Not from any artery like that or a massive blood loss wound. They would always have some type of transfer stains on their hands or in their clothing. In Abby Williams' case, it was a vein. Do you agree? Yes, it was a jugular vein that was breached. What would be the explanation as to why there's no blood on that you can discern on the sleeves and cuffs and no blood on her hands? There could be multiple explanations, such as she was bound, but there's no evidence of that. Pathology would be the one to tell us if potentially she was unconscious or she was restrained. Would counsel approach, please, says the court, just unprovoked. Can we not talk about her being restrained? Is that not allowed? Here's a sidebar conference. We need to take a break. We've got some jurors that are having some difficulty. Mr. Luttrell says, okay. Sidebar conference concluded. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. While you're outside the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Please don't form any opinions or conclusions about anything. You can discuss the evidence that you've heard, but please only do that if all 15 of you are present in the jury room and at the same time. Please don't deliberate. Gentlemen, all rise. All right, let's take 15 minutes. Let me see how much longer we have of this. All right, so his direct examination is a few pages longer, so we'll finish his direct, and then in the next part, we'll go over his cross. Originally, what I was going to do, just so you guys know, I wanted to not overload myself, and by not overloading myself, I was doing these trial transcripts exposed we're doing them every Sunday at noon, but I'm alternating between Menendez and Delphi. I- After thinking about it, I really don't want to do that. I might just kill myself to get through Delphi because I want to do at least an episode of each per week. So if I can figure out how to get that going in my already busy week, I'm going to do that because I don't want to make you guys wait every 2 weeks for these. So, anyways, just a little side note about that. All right. So, but they take their 15-minute break. They come back. The court says, all right, Mr. Luttrell, are you ready to have the jury back in? Mr. Luttrell says, we are, Your Honor. Ms. Auger? Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Court says, okay. Bailiff says, all rise. Thank you. You may be seated. The court says, you may continue. Mr. Luttrell says, thank you, Your Honor. Major Cicero, with regard to Abby Williams, did you consider whether all the garments on her body were placed on her body after death? Were you asked to examine whether that was? Yes, I was. And now dealing with the upper clothing, which we know was the black bra, the gray bra, a pink tank top, and the sweatshirt. What is your opinion about whether she was wearing those items at the time that she was murdered? It's my opinion, based upon my review of the clothing saturation, that she was wearing it at the time she was killed. Why do you conclude that? The saturation stains were primarily on the interior portion of the sweatshirt. If she was completely naked at the time and dressed after the fact, we would expect to see blood transferred to other parts of the clothing on the upper body as well as her body itself. Also, dressing a person who is deceased after the fact with the blood stains on the chin, dressing somebody would most likely alter those stains on her mouth as well. And did you see any sign or any indication that that had happened? No, I saw no sign of that. Are you familiar with the term core body temperature? Yes, I am. And what is that? It's when investigators, like crime scene investigators, obtain a core temperature at the time of death to evaluate what's referred to as algor mortis, the cooling of the body, which, as a rule of thumb, is by textbooks, appears to be approximately 1 to 5 degrees every hour. Of cooling? Of cooling, yes. And what methods are used when core body temperature is taken? For at least crime scene investigators or coroners at the scene, the only known method that I'm aware of that's somewhat accurate would be rectal temperature, sir. And you've seen a crime scene investigator, right? or I'm sorry, you've been a crime scene investigator, right? Yes. And you've taught crime scene investigation. Yes. You've been tested on it. Yes. Would you recommend, should the officers at this crime scene have taken a core body temperature via the rectum of either of the girls? Based upon this investigation, I would say no. This is only because inserting something, an object like a thermometer, into someone's rectum could potentially, one, create injury, which it's my understanding in reviewing this case that there was concern for sexual assault, and also you never want to introduce anything that could potentially affect potential DNA in a sexual assault. Regarding predation and entomology, you know what I mean by those? Yes. You defined entomology, not really. What do we mean by predation in this context? I'm sorry, sir. In this context. Predation is the animal activity that would consume a decedent. So that is with entomology. Okay. And do you have any experience in studying, in addition to the entomology, you said that you studied in studying predation and having experience with studies of bodies out in the open environment, such as these were? Yes. So my experience and tenure at the University of Tennessee Anthropological Research Facility, which is also known as the Body Farm, again, I've been there for 18 years and primarily I do entomology, but part of the entomology studies also is how entomology is affected by predation. And what we've learned over the years is that when predation does occur, it creates a blood source for the entomological specimens to be attracted to. Normally, entomology is the blowfly is attracted to the nose, mouth, and ears and the eyes when somebody passes. When there's a blood source, flies detect that and they may lay their eggs in there as well. Did you see any sign of entomology or blowfly activity with relation to the victims in all the crime scene photos and reports that you reviewed? No, I did not. Would you be surprised if, in this location in Indiana, that you would have in the middle of February blowfly activity? I would not expect to see blowfly activity. Blowflies are active when it is approximately 50 to 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Blowflies are not active at night, and it's my understanding the victims had visited this location and potentially had been there overnight and were not seen at any time in the nighttime. Blowflies are not active until in the later mornings either. But regardless of that, their climate is always going to affect blowfly activity. Would you expect to see in this region, in the area where the girls were found, would you be surprised not to see any predation activity at this time of the year for an extent of perhaps as long as 22 hours before the girls were found? I am not surprised that we didn't see predation on the bodies. As I stated, I've been doing research and doing my job at the University of Tennessee's Anthropological Research Center, and there's been times where when I arrived, bodies had been laying out for weeks at a time and it had no predation. Predation animals that could be consistent with this area in central Indiana could be coyotes, vultures, possum, and rats. But keep in mind that as the cooler temperatures, that's it. Similar to entomology, entomology blowflies smell. They have sensors in there on their body and they can determine that there's decomp and flesh for them to lay their eggs. Similar to predators, it's if it's cold, if there's not a lot of odor, also you have to take into consideration that we're in a little valley, if you will, next to a body of water that could all have an effect on predation. Or the girls' bodies might not have been there as long as the state is saying. That's another reason why. Could have just been put there overnight. Major Cicero, have do you consider, based upon crime scene reconstruction and the blood stain patterns that you've observed here, do you have an opinion as to the minimum number of individuals required to take the lives of Abby Williams and Libby German? Objection, Your Honor. This is completely outside of Mr. Major Cicero's area of expertise, and it's just complete speculation. Mr. Luttrell says, I think he's fully demonstrated that it's nothing close to being outside of his expertise, and he's not only been a crime scene reconstructionist, but he's taught it and has practiced it for a number of years, and I believe that he can answer the question. They haven't once talked about the number of people or anything to. Okay. Overruled, says the court. And he answers, at least one person could have committed this crime. Obviously, one person had to have committed this crime, but at least one person committed this crime. It's possible based upon the context and all the information that's obtained at this point. Huh? Okay, so at least one person did it. Okay, great. But you didn't give any other thoughts. And if one's how did he control them? How did he You said they weren't tied up. You said it just happened in that place. Like what? No. No, none of this makes sense. Mr. Luttrell says, "Thank you. I have no further questions. You may return to your seat." Ms. Auger, why would he say you may return to your seat? Ms. Auger has questions. Um, At least one, possibly more, says Ms. Auger. Wait, sorry. We're going to get into that next episode. So that is where we will stop. Um, so yeah, that was like really, not once did they talk about like the manner in which these things were done or how it was done or anything like that. We just go from, well, here's the blood evidence, and then all of a sudden, definitely one person at least did this. Okay. But you didn't even tell us how it was done or what manner or anything. And yet we're at this. I don't know. I just don't get it. These people, are they making sense? Is this, am I in the Twilight Zone? Am I the only one that I'm just like, that was a weird testimony? He did all this blood evidence and talked about how blood stain patterns are, and then just completely, at least one person did this. But they totally sideswipe the whole, well, could two people have done it? Could more? Like how did it happen? Did one get tied up and the other was just held by gunpoint? Like what? There's no explanation as to any of it. And he's just like, yeah, we're good. No further questions. So obviously one person did it. Okay, great. Nothing else. I got nothing else to ask. I have so many more questions. If I'm a juror, I have so many more questions after this that were not addressed in his testimony. So I really hope that Ms. Auger asks some more questions that the state somehow didn't get to. All right, so that is it for today's episode. I am going to try to start filming both. So going forward, I want to do Menendez Brothers on Sundays and Delphi trial on Tuesdays. So just to give you a heads up, I'm gonna switch it up next week, I think, or whenever I start doing 2 a week. But for right now, I'm trying the alternate version. So, but I think I'm gonna go one per week because I wouldn't want to wait 2 weeks. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. So, anyways, that's what has been happening with me and the channel. So I hope that you guys stick it out with me. Sorry again for the lull, the hiatus, but I'm going to pick up with these. Like I said, I want to go weekly. I don't want to make you guys wait. So I'll see you guys next week. Take care. Bye now. That's the end of this Trial Transcripts Exposed. Thanks for following along with me. Like if you want more, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.